Helium now strikes to the lead. Along the rail, that's Candyman Rocket racing along second. Way out on the outside, Hidden Stash is absolutely in full stride. Down to the wire, it's Hidden Stash and Rafael Bejarano along the rail. Digging back gamely is Helium. Looks like we're down to two. Helium repels the challenge. It's Helium in a huge effort. Turns away the challenge.
Welcome back to another Kentucky Derby profile here on Racing Rundown. Today we're discussing Hidden Stash, the second place finisher of the 2021 Tampa Bay Derby. And as usual, we're going to go through some of his past performances and then talk about what I think he is going to be going into this Kentucky Derby. And I will start out by saying I think Hidden Stash has a lot of promise to be a horse that you can use underneath in this Kentucky Derby. I'll introduce this a little bit. You go back through the recent history of the Kentucky Derby. There's always a horse that is at a big price. You saw it last year with Mr. Big News. Year before it was Country House. Year before that, it was Instilled Regard, and so on. So every year in the Kentucky Derby, you always have a long shot horse that you're going to want to use underneath. And I think Hidden Stash is going to be that kind of horse that you're going to want to use underneath. So let's talk about Hidden Stash's races in his career. First two starts were both maiden victories at Ellis and Churchill, respectively. And those were defeats for him. This is also a horse who's never finished worse than fourth in his career. Even though he's got only has two victories, I should say. Never been off the board in 7 career starts. So that's a very good thing about him going into the Kentucky Derby. And his only 2 times where he wasn't in the money were his first career start, which you can definitely forgive, and the Bluegrass, which I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So looking at his career, first 2 races, those were going 6.5 furlongs. I'm very willing to forgive him that because it's looked like in his subsequent starts that he's needed longer distances. And he stretched out in his maiden breaking effort to 1 1/16 miles. He won there by 3 lengths, coming from off the pace in that race. And the thing about Hidden Stash that is nice to see with him is he's not entirely dependent most of the time on a fast pace. And this is very valuable for the Kentucky Derby because if there's a situation where the pace is, it's not going to be a walk. I've said this several times in these previews. They're not going to be walking early. But with Hidden Stash, if the Kentucky Derby is, say, a 1:11 3/4 mark, on the higher end of 1:11, then that's going to be just fine for him. He's been able to close into paces like that in several of his races. He did that in his allowance victory at Churchill in November. That was a very slow pace early, and he was still able to rally and win that race. He won by less than he did in his maiden breaking effort, but he still won that race. Then, going to his stakes efforts. This is where I think the value is going to start to come in with Hidden Stash because you look at, he hasn't won since that November allowance race, and I think that's going to push a lot of people away from him. And when I see that, the fact that that's probably going to push people away, I'm immediately drawn to a horse like that because I like horses that have shown consistency in their career, but when I'm looking at this from the perspective of trying to find a big long shot in the Kentucky Derby, I should further specify. I like horses that have shown consistency, ability to finish in the money and on the board, but just are not necessarily the most consistent in terms of the victories, which would push a lot of people away, doesn't necessarily push me away. So, a little bit of a tangent there, but going into the Sam Davis, I think he may have been a little bit too far back in this race, but not an excuse for him. He was wide on the far turn, but he was only a neck away from being second in this race, even though he was third. Candyman Rocket won this race by a length, and he, in all intent purposes, lost this race, I should say, by about a length, give or take a quarter of a length or something like that. But still, really good effort for him in the Sam Davis second stakes race and second start of 2021 Tampa Bay Derby, race where I thought he was going to win this race. I talked about this with the Helium preview. Looked like he was past Helium. Helium re-rallied somehow and went on to win that race. I don't think that's a complete indictment on Hidden Stash. The other thing about him is that he may not be a horse that likes to pass horses in stakes races, at least pass horses enough to get him the victory in there. But if he's able to come late and run this kind of a race where he may, even if he comes up to a horse, challenges them, they put him away, that horse re-breaks, Hidden Stash still finishes a good second or a good third. That's good enough for me if I'm looking at him from the perspective of a show horse. Most recent start, the Bluegrass, I think that was his most excuse-ridden race. He was pretty far back in a race at Keeneland, a track that is known to not be the most forgiving track for closers, and really you have Highly Motivated, who didn't really have much competition on the front end. Fractions were not too bad, but Highly Motivated was moving easily. Essential Quality had trouble getting by him, so that's how easy of a trip that Highly Motivated got in that race. And when there's a situation like that, it's really hard for horses in back to try to come late. So I think that Hidden Stash is definitely better than that fourth place finish in the Bluegrass, and had it been a little bit more advantageous to him, he may have been able to finish a good third or even second in the race. But finished fourth, still had enough points to get to the Kentucky Derby, and I think that for the reasons that I've already mentioned, he's not going to be a win contender. I will further specify. This is a horse that has shown an inability to win in stakes races, and you look no further than his run in the Tampa Bay Derby. But if you're looking for a horse to give you some value underneath, the record is inconsistent enough for folks to look elsewhere in terms of their win bets. I think that this is a horse that you can absolutely pencil in underneath in the bottom of your try or your superfectas, and even if you don't play exotics, just for a show bet or a place bet. You look at what horses like Mr. Big News have paid. I would definitely advocate, if you're going to play the Kentucky Derby, play a show bet on a massive long shot, because if you find the right horse, the payouts can be really nice. I hit Country House in 2019. I can definitely vouch for you that can be very successful. So definitely look for your long shot horse. Hidden Stash is a horse that I think has a real potential to be that horse in the Kentucky Derby. Don't think he's a win candidate, but I think he's one that you have to give serious consideration to use. So with that being mentioned, that's it for this preview. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.